Welcome back to Questing Beast. I am Ben. Today we are looking at 3 of the strangest games that I have ever looked at on this channel. This is the top 10 games you can play in your head by yourself, and the sequel, the top 10 scary games you can play in your head by yourself, and this is an expansion for this book, Power to the Player Expansion Pack. Now, what are these books? Well, allegedly, they are a series of adventure game scenarios that have been compiled together, originally written by J. Theophrastus Bartholomew back in the 80s and 90s. The story goes that he wrote 14 volumes of these books, but they were lost to time. No one really picked up on them. Hardly anyone has ever heard of them until Sam Gorski and D.F. Lovett, the editors of these books, discovered them at a garage sale and became enamored with them. They thought these games were incredibly cool, and so they actually acquired the rights to publish them and have compiled some of the best games in these volumes. Now, as you may have been able to tell, J. Theophrastus Bartholomew is a pen name, as not a real person. These were all designed by Sam Gorski and D.F. Lovett. You may know Sam Gorski. He is one of the co-founders of Corridor Digital, which is a really popular YouTube channel that makes VFX-driven shorts, and also of Corridor Crew, where he and his friends create a series called VFX Artists React, which you may have seen before. When I saw on his channel that he was promoting these books that he had written, I became very interested because I love strange, out-of-the-box game books. I've looked at other strange game books on this channel in the past, like the Combat Hero series, which is a multiplayer first-person shooter game where you and another player can hunt each other down in a maze and try and kill each other. Or games like Maze, where you're trying to navigate this strange labyrinth, and it's allegedly the world's most challenging puzzle. But when I actually went and picked up these books for myself, and I'll put a link down below as to where you can get them, I was very surprised by what I found. These are a series of adventure scenarios, but they're not really that. You certainly can play them. I gave it a little bit of a try. But really, the whole thing is a commentary on the nature of game books and of role-playing. It's a little bit of a love letter and maybe a little bit of a parody of these types of games that were coming out throughout the 80s and 90s. So many of the books coming out during that time period were focusing on trying to take role-playing games, first created by Dungeons & Dragons, and put it into this book form, make it more compact, more portable, more easy to get into. And there was a lot of innovation in that sphere, of people trying weird ideas and formats, seeing how far they could push this type of RPG. Well, these books take that to an extreme. As you can see on the back here, it says, "Your mind is now the ultimate gaming engine. Ditch the remote, ditch the controller, explore worlds and stories through a revolutionary single-player role-playing system that pushes your imagination beyond its furthest limits." And that engine is literally just your imagination. The structure of these, and we'll get into the different scenarios and see how they work, is that it presents an idea for an adventure, it sets up a framework, and it's there to prime your imagination with ideas. And then once your imagination has been primed, it just says, go. And your idea is that you're just going to sit there and you're going to imagine the whole adventure yourself. You're going to play the protagonist, you're going to play the antagonist, you're going to play everything in the world. Is that something that's possible to do? Of course. Is that something that's actually fun for most people? That's debatable. But the deeper that I read into these books, the more I realized that the enjoyment that I was getting out of it wasn't so much from actually trying to play these adventures, but just from reading the books themselves and getting to know J. Theophrastus Bartholomew better and watching his ideas slowly get more and more ambitious and go off the rails. All right, let's start out with the first book, Top 10 Games You Can Play in Your Head by Yourself. Starts out with a foreword here by Sam Gorski and D.F. Lovett, and it says, "We did not write this book, although we wish we did." And it summarizes how they first discovered 6 volumes of the games you can play in your head by yourself and how they got the rights to it and have put it together into this compilation. And what this framing device most reminds me of is The Princess Bride, not the movie, but the book. In that book, the author, William Goldman, who actually also wrote the screenplay to the movie, he has this framing device where he pretends that The Princess Bride is a real book that was read to him as a kid by his dad. But when, as an adult, he actually read the book, he found that it was very different and his dad had heavily edited it as he was reading it. And so he has republished The Princess Bride, but it's just the good parts version. He's cut it down to the most entertaining, the best parts of the book. And over the course of the book, which is just as incredible as the movie, it ends up being this loving commentary on literature, on life, on adventures, on romance, and all of this stuff. And in a similar way, this book and the sequels are using the game book format to kind of comment on the nature of game books and of role-playing, and maybe even a little bit on the kind of person that writes games like this. Now, there is an initial exercise here that it invites you to do, where you want to kind of split yourself into your normal self and then your shadow self, and your shadow self is going to steal something from a building, and then your normal self has to go in and figure out what it's stolen. But the way it's described is actually kind of confusing. It's a little bit unclear how you're going to divide your knowledge into two pieces. I actually found the introduction to the sequel, Top 10 Scary Games, to be a little bit clearer, where it just has this simple scenario where imagine that you are being chased through the forest by this shadowy figure, and that shadowy figure is your shadow self. The exercise is just being able to switch back and forth between these two perspectives of being the protagonist and the antagonist, and being able to hold both of those things in your mind at the same time. But after that, it quickly launches into the actual adventures themselves, and these are very interesting in that they start out pretty straightforward and then slowly get crazier and crazier as the books go on. Before we dive into that though, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Legends of Akaroth, an RPG that blends the traditions of tabletop RPGs, classic JRPGs like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, and the quiet, reflective rhythm of solo play. It features a fast, intuitive dice system, easy initiative, and the clear choices of turn-based combat. Explore a world filled with shrines, forests, villages, and mysteries waiting to be uncovered, with the GM leading the way, or on your own, using the prompts, events, and outcomes that the game provides. You can roll to see what happens each day and journal the results as your story grows. Legends of Akaroth is live on BackerKit right now, so go check it out using the link in the description below. So the first adventure is just called Adventure, and it's one of the more straightforward ones. It's a little bit themed around something like Raiders of the Lost Ark. You're an adventurer going to Cairo around World War II, and you're trying to find a lost artifact. And it guides you through all of these things that you should be thinking about. Are you a man or a woman? What's your age? Are you a good guy or a bad guy? An American or a Nazi in the case of this World War II themed scenario? What is it that you're looking for? What is the tomb that you seek? Is it a tomb of haunted riches, one of ancestral secrets, or one that will bring hope to humanity? You can dive deeper into your personal background. What is the troubling childhood memory that you perpetually relive? Every once in a while, it uses these scripted scenarios to tell you what's going on around you, really to immerse you in the world and get you ready to start imagining. Like you arrive at this speakeasy, and here's a number of characters that you run into with their own backstories, people that might be involved in your adventure. But you can hear your name being whispered by a ghost in the background. Perhaps this is a figure from your past come to haunt you who will also show up during the adventure. Once your memory and your imagination is fully primed, it just says go, and you are off to the races. It's your job to just daydream and imagine what happens next for as long as you want until you feel like it has reached the proper conclusion. Now, I started giving these a try. Like the next one here is Space, where you find a spaceship in your garage. You have to go to your garage and imagine the spaceship in there. And it was okay. I don't know if I'm terribly good at just doing everything myself. I like games to give me a little bit more as I go so that I'm not just in charge of all aspects of it. In fact, in the first scenario, when I gave it a try, I just sort of sat down in a quiet place and closed my eyes, and I actually fell asleep. But I did have some pretty weird dreams, so maybe that was influenced by it. So initially, my impressions were not terribly good. I didn't really understand what the whole point of this was. I mean, I don't need a book to imagine things if I wanted to imagine things. Or if I wanted to do a solo adventure, then I could just roll on a bunch of random tables as I went, which is pretty common for people who like solo RPGs. And that would give me more concrete stuff to react to. And it really wasn't until I got to around the fourth scenario that I started realizing that this was not really just a game book and that there was some tongue-in-cheek aspects to it. And that fourth scenario is trucks. In this one, you are imagining that you are a truck driver, trucking across America. That's the imaginative scenario that you have here. You're just in your truck and you're going from city to city. I started cracking up while I was reading it because it's just such a mundane sounding scenario, but it's taken so absolutely seriously. There's a whole bunch of trucks that you're allowed to use in your imagination right here, maybe a semi-trailer or a monster truck. You can tell that the author, J. Theophrastus Bartholomew, was very concerned about the rise of crime during the 80s when this was ostensibly written. And its rising crime sweeps the nation, more aggressive and highly armed splinter groups of two-leggers, that's pedestrians, will actively try and steal the goods from your truck. And you have to take this into account because they're all armed with Uzis. You may, of course, have another family, a secret family that's on the other side of the country. And there are scenarios here that you have to work through where maybe both of your secret families want to go to Disneyland at the same time. What are you going to do? And of course, as a trucker, you need to make sure to make money. So here's a very important economic table that you have to keep track of. This has the buy and sell prices for lots of different commodities, like hot dogs are $5 in Chicago, so you could pick it up there and then sell them for $19 when you reach Phoenix. Of course, these prices are going to fluctuate over time, so that's something you have to keep track of as well in your imagination. All of this cracked me up so much because it reminded me so intensely of reading AD&D, where Gary has all of these, very beautiful kind of platitudes about how incredible role-playing games are and how it's this incredible feat and triumph of the imagination. And it's a world where anything is possible. And now here's 5 pages of polearm rules. This simple, beautiful exercise of just daydreaming and imagination is immediately undermined by these incredibly precise and finicky rules for simulating a world in extreme detail. Or here's one, The Visitor, which is a little bit like Stranger Things or like E.T., where you're a kid in your backyard and a strange being from another dimension has visited you. Oh man, where is this going to go? And then it immediately goes crazily off the rails. You meet Drexel the Warrior Toad, who's actually a character that showed up in the space episode. There's a lot of weird, funny crossovers between all these episodes that start subtly implying that all of these adventures are in the same universe. He has this big long monologue and he wants a glass of water. If you refuse to give him the water, he dies of dehydration within 30 seconds. If you do give him the water, it will poison him and he will die because it was contaminated. And if you give him an alternative like soda or iced tea, he will ramble about his home planet on a euphoric sugar high for 15 minutes and then die abruptly. Note from the editors, we were hesitant to include the Visitor in this book because of the glaring bug, which results in no condition for success of saving Drexel's life. However, the game is still playable and still robust upon his death. In good faith, here is the rest of the game as it stands. Where can the adventure go from here? What are you going to do with the body? Oh, a bunch of his toad warrior friends have shown up. Are you going to ally with them to go on an adventure? No, you need to rescue Drexel from hell. It's all just the most ludicrous premise that you can imagine for a story, and the book takes it so seriously. I was dying. It just reminds me of so many D&D adventures that I've read where the premise doesn't make any sense. And there's all of these situations where no matter what you do, the same result is always going to happen. But the author is very convinced that this is an amazing adventure. There's a scenario for the Alamo. There's one for a murder mystery. There's one where you're just at your job and it's being taken over by robots. Whether you're on the side of the robots or not is going to be up to you. There's one adventure just called Chess, where you are playing chess against a fictional character in your head. I love how at the back of the book, there's all these testimonials from people who have played these stories before you, telling you about all of the special endings and stuff that they got. Like IVB says in the truck scenario, I stopped playing when I killed so many pedestrians that every cop in America was trying to chase me down. It just stopped being worth it, trying to get from city to city with that much heat on my tail. So the sequel, Top 10 Scary Games You Can Play in Your Head by Yourself, if anything, is even more ludicrous. The first scenario was just called Killer, where you get to play a serial killer. The editors want you to know that this is very bad and you should definitely not do this in real life. Do you want to be a serial killer, a spree killer? Perhaps you're a good guy with a gun, the military, a victim, an executioner? As it goes on, the scenarios get more and more insane and more kind of intentionally offensive in the sense that it's written from this almost Dirty Harry-esque 1980s perspective. And the editors are always apologizing for how insensitive J. Theophrastus Bartholomew is really funny. You could be a private assassin, a cult leader. Pick your weapon of choice. Here's your target, Craig Bronkowski. Maybe you need some excuses to avoid doing the killing, because really it's up to you whether you actually kill Craig. And then once you have that in your head, go, start imagining. The next scenario is just called Naked, because it's you're in your hometown, and for some reason, you're naked. How are you going to find clothes without getting horribly embarrassed? Or maybe the big city, where you're just a guy who lives in the country, and you've discovered that your daughter has run off to the big city, and you're going to go there and get her back again. You could be a supernatural beast, which kind of supernatural beast is really going to be up to you. There's the love of your life, and the editors say that there are certain games in which it becomes clear that J. Theophrastus Bartholomew forgot that some people playing his games might not be a heterosexual male. We are working to create a future expansion of this game that allows for other love interests. A bunch of pages in this book have all of these letters scattered around them, and I think you're supposed to take all of those pages and kind of like lay them over each other, and you should be able to spell out probably a secret code. I haven't tried to do that. But here's a really riveting adventure for a daydreaming business magnate, where you are a guy who runs a business. And that's the premise. Make sure that you create a plan for business logistics and for your sales strategy. There's a whole formula right here for building an economic environment-based businessman. You just have to use all of these formulas right here with all of these letters and plug them into this spreadsheet right here, and that will give you the results of your perfect salesman. For example, a 47-year-old Caucasian businessman in technology sector, currently single with 12 ex-wives and 11 children. Track record, 7 successful businesses, 16 failures. High-risk serial entrepreneur with complex personal obligations. But don't worry, after all of this work has determined that your business is ultimately going to be a failure, you can still make a deal with the demon. Now, the editors do note that although this game does take place in your imagination, apparently real demons do not care which plane of existence your thoughts operate on, and as such, you might mistakenly sell your actual soul. As a result, they have included a whole section here on how to do an exorcism in case that happens. There's so much crazy stuff in here, like an adventure where it's about an unfathomable creature. So I figured this was going to be an H.P. Lovecraft-like scenario, but really it's this long story that takes you through your entire life until you're right on your deathbed, and that's when the game starts. Or a section called Dungeon Child that seems like it's going to be a big mega dungeon adventure, but it turns out to be just this long piece of basically fiction by J. Theophrastus Bartholomew, because he was an aspiring novelist and he just couldn't help himself but to just write this whole world full of all of his background lore. I feel like that's a commentary on certain RPG developers. And finally, probably the silliest book in the entire series is the Power to the Player expansion pack, which is framed kind of like, I don't know, an old Nintendo Power magazine where it gives you the cheat codes to unlock bonus stuff in the games. Except, of course, these games are taking place entirely in your head. Like in the Naked scenario, you can unlock a new character. J. Theophrastus Bartholomew himself, the author, is now present inside the book. Or for the Supernatural Beast adventure, you can unlock a new quest line, the Savage Heart Chronicles, if you want a little bit of monster romance in your monster fiction. Or in the mental hospital scenario, you can unlock the item, the pill, which you take to make yourself feel better. And it's clear that over time, you're slowly going crazier and crazier as the name Craig Bronkowski shows up over and over again, implying that you're in the mental hospital because you were the killer from that earlier scenario. The thing that came up over and over while I was reading these books is who exactly is the audience for them? Like I said, they're perfectly playable. It's just your imagination. Anyone can take any scenario that someone gives you and then just daydream up what comes next. There's no problem with that. Although you don't need all of the background information that these books include in order to do that. The entertainment really comes from trying to figure out who is J. Theophrastus Bartholomew? What is his deal? It's about enjoying all of the weird in-jokes and the commentary on game books and on role-playing games that are built in throughout it. Now, these books were definitely not written for kids, so I wouldn't buy it as a gift for them. But if there's any adults in your life who really enjoy game books and would appreciate the level of parody and all of the in-jokes about this type of gaming, then I think they would probably get a big kick out of it. In any case, I really appreciate Sam Gorski and D.F. Lovett really going for it and doing something very strange with game books. The whole thing really feels like a kind of private joke that is just extended further and further and further over the years, which in my mind actually just makes it funnier. As usual, I will put links in the description below for where you can pick this up for yourself if you want a copy. And thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.